847 yards. That's where the body lay, perfect distance for what happened next. Sheriff Daniel Brennan stood over the corpse in the crisp October morning, his breath forming white clouds as he examined the single bullet wound. Center mass, straight through the heart, clean entry, cleaner exit, the kind of shot that doesn't happen by accident. His radio crackled. "Sheriff, we've got another one, quarter-mile west. Same method, single shot, impossible distance." Brennan's head snapped up toward the cabin on the ridge. She was already watching him, 27 years old, 5'3", blonde ponytail, standing on her porch like a statue carved from Montana granite itself. The kind of woman you'd expect to see teaching kindergarten, not dropping armed men at distances most people couldn't even see. Self-defense. Her voice cut across the morning air before he'd even reached the steps. Not an explanation, a statement of fact. They had rifles. They trespassed, they were warned. Brennan had been sheriff of Copper Ridge for 18 years. He knew when someone was lying. He also knew when someone was telling a truth that would destroy his entire week. "Miss Thornfield, I'm going to need you to walk me through the last 96 hours, she nodded once. "You'll want coffee for this, Sheriff." Something in her voice made his blood run cold. "It's a long story." She turned and walked inside. Brennan followed, not knowing that what came next would resurrect secrets buried for 50 years, shatter everything this town believed about heroes and legends, and prove something impossible. The deadliest sniper in Montana wasn't the decorated Marine colonel they all worshipped. It was the quiet woman they'd dismissed and underestimated just 96 hours ago. And her story was about to change everything. Quick pause before we continue. If you're watching this from somewhere in the world right now, let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're enjoying stories like this, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because tomorrow's episode, it goes even deeper than this. The gathering at Copper Ridge Community Hall was scheduled to address water rights and boundary disputes. Standard Montana business, ranchers arguing over creek access, property owners debating fence lines, the usual territorial negotiations that rural communities conducted every autumn. Cass sat in the back row, attempting invisibility. She'd only attended because her property was mentioned on the agenda, some question about an old access road crossing her northern boundary. Her plan was simple: listen, nod when appropriate, and leave without conversation. That plan died the moment Colonel Wade Hutchinson stood to speak. At 67, Hutchinson looked carved from the same mountains surrounding the valley. 6'2", silver hair cut high and tight, shoulders that hadn't forgotten the weight of a rucksack. His face was weathered leather, creased by decades of wind and sun, and his eyes held a clarity that made people uncomfortable. He saw too much, remembered everything. Copper Ridge treated him like visiting royalty. Hutchinson was their claim to fame, their connection to something larger than cattle and hay prices. Marine Force Recon, 25 years of service. Grenada, Panama, Desert Storm, Somalia. 89 confirmed kills across a career that had become legend. He'd retired here in 2001, bought a ranch on the eastern edge of town, and spent his days training horses and his evenings holding court at Murphy's Bar, telling sanitized versions of stories that would make most civilians lose sleep. The room quieted when he stood. Even the most argumentative rancher knew to silence themselves when Iron Hutchinson had something to say. "Before we move forward," Hutchinson said, his voice carrying the parade ground authority of a man who'd commanded in combat, "I want to address something that's been bothering me." Cass felt her stomach tight. She didn't know why, just some instinct, the same one that had kept her alive in Helmand Province. "We've got new people moving into our valley," Hutchinson continued. "Good people, mostly hard workers, folks who respect the land and the community." He paused, scanning the room. His eyes found her, locked on. "But we also need to be clear about who we are and what we value here." Cass's hands gripped the edge of her chair. "I heard we got a former Navy SEAL who bought the old Patterson place. That right, Miss Thornfield?" Every head turned. 50 pairs of eyes finding her in the back row. Cass stood slowly. Protocol. You stood when addressed by senior military, even in civilian settings. Some habits didn't break. "Yes, sir." "Appreciate your service," Hutchinson said. The words were correct. The tone was not. "How long were you in?" "6 years, sir. 2016 to 2022. "Afghanistan, Syria?" "Both, sir." Hutchinson nodded slowly. "I'm sure you did your best. Times have changed since I wore the uniform. Standards have changed." He let that hang in the air for a moment. And what he said next would ignite a confrontation that would test everything Cass had learned in 6 years of proving herself in the most demanding military community in the world. "SEAL training used to be the hardest thing in the world," Hutchinson continued. "Used to be that only the toughest, most capable warriors made it through. Men who could carry a wounded teammate 10 miles through enemy territory. Men who could operate for weeks without support, living on nothing but grit and determination. Cass felt her face flush. She knew where this was going. Now they're letting anyone through, Hutchinson said, lowering his tone to something reasonable, paternal. Lowering standards, political correctness. They're graduating people who can't carry a full combat load. Hell, they're graduating 100-pound girls who couldn't drag a wounded man to safety if their lives depended on it. The room fell silent. Someone coughed, a chair creaked. I'm not saying women can't serve, Hutchinson continued, his voice taking on the reasonable tone of a man who knew he was saying something controversial but believed it anyway. There are plenty of support roles where they excel. Medical, communications, intelligence, but combat, direct action, that's a different animal. That requires a kind of strength and endurance that, frankly, most women just don't have. Cass's jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. Say something, her mind screamed. Defend yourself. Tell him about the 47 combat missions, the teammates you brought home alive, the confirmed kills at ranges he couldn't imagine, but she didn't, because she'd learned in 6 years of fighting for respect in a male-dominated community that arguing only made it worse. You didn't win by talking, you won by doing, and she hadn't done anything yet that these people could see. So yes, Miss Thornfield, I appreciate your service. Hutchinson's smile was grandfatherly, condescending, final. I'm sure you did your best with what nature gave you, but let's not pretend that SEAL standards are what they used to be. This valley respects real warriors, the kind forged in real combat under real standards. He sat down to murmurs of agreement. A few uncomfortable looks shot Cass's way, mostly sympathy, the kind you give someone who's been publicly corrected by their betters. Cass remained standing for 3 heartbeats longer than necessary, long enough for Hutchinson to notice, long enough to make it clear she'd heard him, long enough to remember. Then she sat down, her face burning, and endured another 90 minutes of meaningless discussion about nothing that mattered. When the meeting finally ended, she was the first one out the door. Little did Hutchinson know that his dismissive words had just set in motion a series of events that would force him to confront the biggest mistake of his military career and prove that he'd catastrophically underestimated the woman he'd just humiliated. The purchase of 2,400 acres of Montana wilderness had seemed like salvation. After 6 years of proving herself in the most demanding military community in the world, after 47 missions where she'd performed flawlessly, after carrying wounded teammates and making shots that put her in the top 5% of SEAL snipers, Cass had finally had enough. The ambush outside Lashkar Gah had been the breaking point. 3 teammates killed, 2 more wounded so badly they'd never serve again. Cass had been the only one who made it out of that valley without bleeding. She'd killed 7 Taliban fighters that day, providing cover fire for the evacuation that saved the wounded. She'd done her job perfectly, and she decided she never wanted to do it again. The nightmares came every night for 8 months. The what-ifs, the if-onlys, the faces of men she couldn't save. The therapist at Walter Reed explained it was survivor's guilt, told her it was normal, told her time would help. Time hadn't helped, distance had. Montana was as far from Afghanistan as you could get and still be on Earth. The mountains here were green, not dust brown. The air smelled like pine instead of smoke. The only explosions were thunderstorms rolling down from Canada. She'd found the property through a veterans' land program, 400 acres of forest, meadow, and rocky ridgeline wrapped around a small, unnamed lake. The cabin was a wreck, but Cass knew how to fix things. 6 months of work transformed it from condemned to comfortable. New roof, new windows, plumbing that actually worked, electrical that wouldn't burn the place down. And security, the kind that made her feel safe for the first time since Lashkar Gah, 12 wireless cameras covering every approach, motion sensors along the property lines, reinforced doors with commercial-grade locks, and a basement that had become her armory. M24 sniper rifle with Schmidt and Bender scope. Remington 700 backup with Night Force optics. M4A1 carbine with ACOG and infrared laser. Glock 19 and Sig Sauer P229 for concealed carry. Enough ammunition to fight off a small army. Not because she was paranoid, because she knew what happened when you weren't prepared. Her daily routine was military precise. Wake at 500, run 5 miles through the forest trails she'd mapped and memorized. Return at 600, shower, coffee. 6:30 to 800, weapons maintenance. Every rifle cleaned, every scope checked, every magazine loaded and tested. 800 to 900, patrol the property on her ATV, checking cameras and sensors. The rest of the day was hers, building, reading, hunting when she needed meat. She'd taken 3 elk since spring, each one dropped with a single shot at ranges beyond 400 yards. The meat filled her freezer. The practice kept her skills sharp. She avoided town except for essential supplies, avoided conversation. avoided anything that might lead to questions about her service or her reasons for being here. And she avoided Wade Hutchinson, whose ranch was only 8 miles east, whose reputation cast a shadow over the entire valley, whose judgment had been delivered like a sentence she couldn't appeal. That isolation lasted until the poachers came. But these weren't ordinary poachers, and what Cass discovered on her property would drag her back into a world of violence she thought she'd left behind forever. Cass first noticed them on the trail camera footage from her northern boundary. Week 1 of October, 3 days after the town meeting. 4 men moving through her property at 300 hours, dressed in tactical clothing too expensive for casual hunters. Night vision goggles, thermal scopes, rifles that looked military issue. They moved with coordinated precision, bounding overwatch, hand signals, sector coverage. This wasn't some locals jacking a deer out of season. The cameras tracked them for 40 minutes. They weren't hunting elk or deer. They were focused on something specific, following GPS coordinates, stopping at precise locations to use metal detectors, searching for something buried. And they were targeting the grizzly bears. Cass had 5 grizzlies on her property, a sow with 2 cubs and 2 adult males who maintained territories on the eastern ridgeline. Montana law protected them. Killing one was a federal crime unless your life was in immediate danger. Even the most desperate poacher knew better than to risk that kind of heat. These men didn't seem to care. She watched them set up tranquilizer rifles, portable cages, sedation equipment, professional gear, the kind used by wildlife researchers or illegal traders who sold bear parts to Asian black markets. Gallbladders for traditional medicine, paws for specialty restaurants. A single bear could be worth $30,000 to the right buyer. Cass spent the next day tracking them, not confronting them, not yet. Just observing, learning their patterns, their routes, their procedures. Basic reconnaissance, the kind she'd done 100 times in Afghanistan. What she learned worried her. These weren't amateur poachers. They were former military. The way they moved, the way they communicated, the discipline in their operation. These were men who'd been trained by the same government that had trained her. Probably contractors now, the kind who took high-dollar jobs in gray legal areas because their skills didn't translate to civilian life. On day 4, she followed them to the northwestern section of her property. Rocky terrain, difficult access, rarely visited. They'd brought excavation equipment, shovels, pry bars, a portable winch. They worked for 3 hours, clearing rocks and debris from what looked like a natural depression in the hillside. It wasn't natural. Cass realized that when they finally cleared enough material to reveal concrete underneath. A bunker, old construction, 1960s or 70s by the look of it, covered by 50 years of erosion and vegetation. The men used bolt cutters on a rusted chain, pried open a steel door, disappeared inside with flashlights. 30 minutes later, they emerged carrying a metal briefcase. Military issue, stainless steel with a triple lock system. The leader, a man about 48, 6'1" with a scar running down his left cheek, opened the briefcase. Even from 600 yards away through her spotting scope, Cass could see his expression change. Satisfaction, greed, success. She couldn't see what was inside, but she saw enough. The briefcase was lined with lead, the kind of shielding you use for radioactive materials. The kind the military used for tactical nuclear weapons. Cass's blood went cold, because she just stumbled onto something far more dangerous than bear poaching. And what she did next would determine whether thousands of people lived or died. Cass's property had been a military testing site. She'd found that in the county archives when she'd done title research before buying. Site Yankee, operational from 1965 to 1973, decommissioned after the SALT II Treaty. The record said all hazardous materials had been properly disposed of. The records lied. She watched the men secure the briefcase, mark the GPS coordinates, and begin discussing their next move. Their radio chatter, she'd intercepted their frequency on day 2, was revealing. Package Alpha secured, 13 to go. 13. There were 14 of whatever they were looking for. 14 lead cases hidden in bunkers across her property. Probably plutonium cores from tactical nuclear weapons, small-yield warheads designed for artillery deployment, the kind of thing the Army had tested extensively during the Cold War before deciding they were too dangerous, too unstable, too likely to fall into enemy hands. The kind of thing that was worth millions on the black market. Cass waited until they left. Then she approached the bunker, careful not to disturb obvious signs of entry. The door was still open. She used her flashlight to examine the interior. Concrete walls, old electrical fixtures, storage racks that had mostly collapsed. And in the corner, 13 empty mounting brackets, lead-lined, designed to hold cases exactly like the one the poachers had taken. 1 down, 13 to go, all on her property. She climbed out and carefully sealed the bunker entrance, covering it with rocks and branches to match the surrounding terrain. Then she hiked the 6 miles back to her cabin, her mind racing through options. Call the sheriff, tell him that she'd found evidence of Cold War-era nuclear weapons on her property and armed men were stealing them. Brennan was a decent law enforcement officer, but he was designed for cattle theft and domestic disputes, not international nuclear trafficking. Call the FBI, same problem. By the time federal agents responded, investigated, verified her claims, these men would have recovered all 14 cores and disappeared into whatever criminal network paid for such things. Call someone from her old SEAL team. That felt like admitting she couldn't handle her own problems, like proving Hutchinson right, that she needed support, needed backup, needed help. And she hated that feeling more than anything. But what she didn't know was that the decision was about to be made for her in the most violating way possible. Cass sat on her porch that night, drinking bourbon and watching the stars, trying to decide on the right move. The smart move would be to call for help. The proud move would be to handle it herself. The safe move would be to pack up and leave, let someone else deal with radioactive Cold War relics and armed poachers. She'd never been good at safe moves. The decision was made for her the next morning. She woke at 500 as always, went for her run as always, returned at 600 as always. But something was wrong. The kind of wrong you feel before you see it. Her cabin door was locked. Her security system was armed. But someone had been inside, professional entry, no broken locks, no damaged windows. They'd picked her locks or cloned her security codes. And they'd been careful, almost careful enough. But Cass had spent 6 years living in environments where missing a detail meant death. She noticed things. The coffee mug on her counter moved 3 inches left. The throw blanket on her couch folded differently. Her laptop closed when she always left it open. Someone had searched her cabin while she was running, looking for information, checking what she knew, what she'd found, what she might do. They'd been in her bedroom, her office, her basement armory, though they hadn't taken any weapons, which meant this wasn't theft. It was intelligence gathering. Cass stood in her living room, feeling violated in a way that combat had never made her feel. Her home, her sanctuary, her one place of safety, compromised. She checked her laptop. They'd been in her files, but she kept everything important on an external drive hidden in a waterproof container buried near her lake. They'd found nothing useful. But they'd sent a message. We know where you live. We know your routines. We can reach you anytime we want. Cass walked to her gun safe, unlocked it, and pulled out her M4A1 carbine, checked the magazine chambered around, set it on her kitchen table. Then she pulled out her phone and made a call she'd been avoiding for 8 months. The phone rang 4 times. She almost hung up. Then a gravelly voice answered. Thornfield, been wondering when you'd call. I need help. Where are you? Montana. And I'm in over my head. I'll be there by morning. The line went dead. Cass sat down her phone and stared at the weapon on her table. She'd spent 8 months running from her past, building a new life, trying to become someone other than the warrior she'd been trained to be. That was over now. The warrior was back, and she was done being dismissed, underestimated, and threatened on her own land. But first, she had to do something she'd rather face enemy fire than attempt. Confront the man who'd publicly humiliated her. The man whose judgment had poisoned an entire town against her. The man who, according to declassified military records she'd found earlier that morning, had been the security commander for Site Yankee from 1971 to 1973. Colonel Wade Hutchinson knew about those bunkers, had known for 50 years. And he was going to tell her everything, whether he wanted to or not. Cass loaded her Glock 19, holstered it under her jacket, and drove her truck down the mountain road toward Copper Ridge, toward Hutchinson's ranch, toward a confrontation she'd been avoiding but couldn't escape. The sun was barely up when she pulled into his driveway. The ranch was immaculate. White fences, perfect barn, freshly painted. Horses grazing in paddocks that looked magazine-ready. Everything controlled, everything in its place, just like the man who owned it. Hutchinson sat on his porch, coffee in hand, watching her approach. He didn't look surprised, didn't look concerned, just looked at her the way a teacher looks at a struggling student who's finally come for help. Cass walked up his driveway, her boots crunching on gravel, her heart pounding harder than it had during firefights. This was different. This was personal. She stopped at the bottom of his porch steps, looked up at the legend, at the man who dismissed her, judged her, found her wanting. Colonel Hutchinson, she said, her voice steady, we need to talk about Site Yankee. For the first time since she'd known of his existence, Wade Hutchinson's face showed something other than confidence. His eyes widened fractionally. His coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. The mask of certainty cracked. How do you know that name? His voice was quiet, careful, the voice of a man who just heard something he thought was buried forever. Because I found one of the bunkers, and the men who are cleaning it out. Cass held his gaze, refusing to look away. You were the security commander there 1971 to 1973, which means you know exactly what those bunkers contain, and you've known for 50 years that the disposal records were falsified. Hutchinson stood slowly, set his coffee down. His hand moved to his belt, where Cass knew he kept a .45 ACP in a leather holster, not threatening, just aware. You need to forget about this, he said. Pack up your truck and drive away. This isn't your fight. They're on my land. That makes it my fight. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Then explain it to me. Cass climbed 2 steps, close enough now that Hutchinson would have to acknowledge her as either a threat or an equal, because those men have already taken 1 core. They're coming back for 13 more, and when they get them, they're going to sell them to whoever pays the most. Maybe terrorists, maybe foreign governments, maybe criminal organizations who will make dirty bombs and kill thousands of people. That's classified information. It was classified 50 years ago. Now it's just dangerous. Cass climbed the final steps, standing on the porch level with him, 5'3" facing 6'2". I'm not asking for permission, Colonel. I'm telling you what's happening. And I'm asking if you're going to help stop it, or if you're going to spend the rest of your life knowing you let it happen. Again, that last word hit like a punch. Hutchinson's jaw clenched. His eyes went cold. For a moment, Cass thought he might actually pull that .45. Instead, he said, "Get inside. We need to talk where we won't be overheard." And what Hutchinson told her in the next hour would reveal a 50-year-old conspiracy, a betrayal by a man he'd trusted like a father, and the reason he'd spent decades living with crushing guilt. Cass followed him into a house that looked like a military museum. Unit citations on the walls, photos of men in combat gear, a shadow box with medals, ribbons, and rank insignia. The life of a warrior preserved and displayed. Hutchinson poured them both coffee. Black, no sugar, no cream. Then he sat at his kitchen table and told her a story that had been secret for half a century. Site Yankee was a tactical nuclear weapons testing facility, he began. 1965 to 1973, we were developing artillery-launched nuclear warheads, small-yield devices, 5 to 10 kilotons. The idea was that conventional artillery could deploy tactical nukes on the battlefield without needing bombers or missiles. That's insane, Cass said. That was the Cold War. Hutchinson's voice was tired, old. We built 14 functioning prototypes. Each one had a plutonium core about the size of a softball, enough radioactive material to contaminate a city block if improperly handled, enough to make a dirty bomb that could kill thousands. What happened to them? The SALT II Treaty happened. 1972, nuclear arms reduction. Both sides agreed to dismantle certain weapon systems. Tactical artillery nukes were on the list. We got orders to dispose of the prototypes, send them to Nevada test site for proper dismantling and burial. Cass watched his face. But you didn't. I was a lieutenant, 26 years old. I followed orders. Hutchinson stared into his coffee cup like it held answers to questions he'd been asking for 50 years. My commanding officer was Colonel Harrison Caldwell, good Marine, combat veteran, smart, capable, respected by everyone. He told me the trucks were coming to transport the cores to Nevada, told me to supervise the loading. He paused. But they never went to Nevada. I didn't know that, not for sure, not until 20 years later when some documents got declassified. Hutchinson looked up at her. The trucks left Site Yankee, but they only went 20 miles to various locations around the facility. Caldwell had them buried in unmarked bunkers, sealed with concrete, covered with rock and soil. Made them disappear. Why? Insurance, leverage, access to nuclear materials that officially didn't exist. Hutchinson set down his coffee cup with enough force to make it ring. I didn't learn the truth until 1993. By then, Caldwell was a senator, decorated war hero, untouchable. And I was a colonel with a career to protect. I told myself the cores were buried safely, that they'd stay buried, that no one would ever find them. You were wrong. I was a coward. The word came out like a confession. I should have reported it, should have demanded an investigation, but I didn't want to believe that a man I respected had lied to me, and I didn't want to destroy my own career trying to prove it. Cass absorbed this, the weight of 50 years of guilt sitting in a kitchen in Montana, finally being spoken aloud. The men stealing them, she said. Who are they? I don't know. But if they know about Site Yankee, if they have locations, if they have the equipment and expertise to handle nuclear materials. Hutchinson trailed off. This is bigger than Poachers. This is an organized operation, probably former military, definitely well-funded, and they're not going to stop just because you found them. Then we stopped them. Hutchinson laughed, sharp and bitter. Miss Thornfield, you're a SEAL who couldn't handle 6 years of service. I'm an old man who hasn't seen combat in 23 years, against professionals with nuclear weapons at stake. We'd be dead in an hour. Cass stood, walked to his window, looked out at the mountains that held secrets she was now responsible for protecting. I did 47 combat missions, she said quietly. I have 38 confirmed kills. I carried wounded teammates 5 miles through enemy territory. I made shots at distances you can't imagine under conditions that would have broken anyone. I earned my trident the same way you earned your rank, through blood, sweat, and refusing to quit when everything in me wanted to. She turned to face him. You dismissed me because I'm small, because I'm a woman, because you don't believe the modern military could possibly produce warriors as capable as your generation. Cass's voice was level, controlled. But I'm not here to prove anything to you. I'm here because those cores are on my property, and I'm the only person in this valley with the training and experience to stop those men, with your help or without it. Hutchinson studied her, really looked at her for the first time, not seeing a girl playing soldier, but seeing a combat veteran who'd walked through the same fire he had, just in different mountains. You have a plan? He asked. I have a teammate coming, former SEAL solid operator. Need at least 2 more, preferably with EOD and medical experience. I know 2 Marines, retired good men. If I call, they'll come. Then call them. Cass pulled out her phone, opened a map application. While they're traveling, you're going to tell me everything you remember about Site Yankee, every bunker location, every access tunnel, every detail that might help us recover those cores before those men do. And then what? We're not law enforcement. We can't arrest them, can't hold them. We don't need to arrest them. We need to secure the cores and then call the FBI with a complete package, locations, evidence, everything wrapped up with a bow. Cass met his eyes. Unless you'd rather let them go. Let those 14 cores end up on the black market. Let whatever happens next be someone else's problem. Hutchinson was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, walked to a locked cabinet, and pulled out a folded map, yellowed with age, marked with notations in faded ink. Site Yankee master layout, he said. I kept it against regulations, against orders, kept it because I knew that someday, somehow, this would come back. He spread it on the table. 14 bunkers, numbered Alpha through November, all within a 5-mile radius of your cabin. Cass looked at the map, at the notations, at the memories of a 26-year-old lieutenant who'd followed orders and spent 50 years regretting it. What changed your mind? She asked. About helping me. Hutchinson was quiet. Then, my son, Garrett, he's a Marine gunnery sergeant instructor at Scout Sniper School. He called me 6 months ago, told me about a female SEAL who just completed the advanced course. Said she was the best natural shooter he'd seen in 15 years. Said she had the temperament, the discipline, the instinct. Said she reminded him of me at her age. Cass felt something cold settle in her chest. He told me her name was Cassidy Thornfield. Said she was posted to Montana after she retired, asked if I'd look her up, maybe offer some guidance. Hutchinson looked at her. I said I would. Then you showed up at that town meeting, and I let my pride and my prejudice cloud my judgment. I saw a young woman and assumed she couldn't possibly be the warrior my son described. So you humiliated me publicly. Yes, and I've regretted it every day since. Hutchinson's voice carried real shame. When you came here this morning, I knew. My son trained you, taught you everything I taught him, which means you're not just good, you're generationally good. Cass absorbed this, the connection, the legacy, the fact that she'd been trained by the son of the man who'd become her enemy. Your son saved my life, she said quietly. In Syria, I was pinned down, 3 hostiles closing in. Gunny Hutchinson provided counter-sniper fire from 800 yards, dropped all 3 in 15 seconds. After the mission, he pulled me aside and said, You've got the talent. Now develop the discipline. Be better than good. Be certain. Hutchinson's eyes glistened just for a moment. That's Garrett, he said. Always teaching, always pushing people to their potential. He never mentioned you by name, Cass continued. Just said his father was a Marine legend, that he'd learned everything from a man who'd forgotten more about shooting than most people would ever know. And I spent the last 8 months treating his best student like she was playing dress-up. Hutchinson picked up the map. I can't undo that, but I can help you finish this. Not because you need me, because I need to fix what I broke 50 years ago. Cass nodded once. Then let's get to work. They spent the next 6 hours going over the map. Hutchinson's memory was sharp. He remembered each bunker location, each access route, each security measure that had been in place. He sketched additional details, corrected GPS coordinates, provided information that wasn't on any official record. By the time the sun set, they had a complete picture of Site Yankee's layout. 14 bunkers, 14 plutonium cores, and somewhere between 2 and 7 days before the poachers recovered them all. Cass's phone buzzed at 1900 hours. Text message from her incoming teammate, landing Missoula 600. See you tomorrow. Backup was coming. Intelligence was gathered. Mission was taking shape. She stood to leave. Hutchinson walked her to the door. Thornfield, he said as she reached her truck. One more thing, Cass turned. I was wrong about you, about women in combat, about modern warriors. Hutchinson's voice was steady, sincere. You're right that I judged you without cause, but more than that, I failed to see that courage and capability don't care about gender or size or what generation you belong to. They care about heart, and you've got more heart than most men I served with." Cass nodded, accepting it, not forgiving yet, but acknowledging. "Tomorrow," she said. "Your place 800, bring your team, we'll plan this properly. What if those poachers come back tonight? Then I'll handle it." Cass climbed into her truck. "I've been handling things on my own for 8 months. One more night won't kill me." She drove back to her cabin, mind racing through tactical scenarios. One teammate arriving tomorrow, 2 more coming from Hutchinson's connections. 4 operators total against an unknown number of hostiles with professional equipment and nuclear materials at stake. Bad odds, worse stakes. Exactly the kind of mission she'd sworn she was done with. But as she pulled up to her cabin and saw the mountains silhouetted against the stars, she realized something. She hadn't been running from combat. She'd been running from failure, from the ambush that killed her teammates, from the guilt that followed. This was different. This was her land, her responsibility, her chance to stop something terrible before it happened. She carried her rifle inside, locked the door, checked her security system, and settled in for the night. Tomorrow would bring allies, plans, and preparation. But tonight brought something else entirely. 4 armed men who were about to learn that Cassidy Thornfield wasn't prey. The 4 heat signatures moved like ghosts through Cass's northern perimeter. Professional spacing, textbook bounding, Overwatch 2 advancing while 2 provided cover. These weren't amateurs stumbling through the dark. Cass watched them through her night vision scope from the second-floor window she'd reinforced specifically for this purpose. Ballistic glass, reinforced frame, clear sight lines covering 270 degrees of approach. She'd built this cabin for survival, and tonight that preparation would pay dividends. The lead man stopped at 200 yards. Hand signal. The team halted. Another signal, 2 split left, 2 right, classic pincer movement. They'd done their homework, studied her cabin's layout, planned their approach to minimize exposure. Cass's phone, emergency text to Sheriff Brennan, 4 armed hostiles on my property. Self-defense situation developing. Then she set it aside. Brennan was 20 minutes away even if he floored it. This would be over in 5. She could have dropped all 4 before they reached 150 yards. Easy shots, controlled environment. She had the high ground, the superior position, and they had no idea she was tracking their every move. But Cass wasn't trying to kill anyone tonight. She was sending a message. The team reached 100 yards. Split formation now, 2 approaching the cabin front, 2 circling to the rear. They expected her to be asleep, expected surprise, expected an easy target. Cass switched on her external floodlights. 4,000 lumens of LED brilliance turned night into day. The poachers froze, night vision goggles suddenly useless, eyes struggling to adjust. 3 seconds of confusion, more than enough. Cass's voice boomed through the external speakers she'd installed. "You have 10 seconds to leave my property. After that, I start shooting." The lead man recovered first, ripped off his night vision, raised his rifle toward the cabin. Cass put a round through the tree 6 inches from his head. The suppressed M4 made a sound like a heavy cough. The tree exploded in a shower of bark and splinters. 9 seconds. 2 of them ran, just turned and sprinted back toward the tree line. Smart men, survivors, the other 2 held position, professionals, the kind who'd been in enough firefights to know that running from a sniper was how you died tired. "Drop your weapons," Cass commanded. "Hands on your heads, you leave alive or you leave in bags. Choose now." The lead man spoke. Cass recognized the voice, the man from the bunker, the leader with the scar. "Thornfield, we're just doing a job. No need for this to get ugly." "You broke into my home," Cass said. "Searched my property, threatened my security. That's already ugly. We can make a deal, walk away, forget what you saw. There's money in this for you. I'm going to count to 3. Then I'm calling the sheriff and the FBI and every federal agency that deals with stolen nuclear materials. 1. Be reasonable. 2. The lead man made his decision. Hand signal to his partner. Both men dropped their rifles, raised their hands, and started backing away slowly. "Keep moving," Cass said. "All the way to the tree line, all the way off my land, and tell whoever hired you that Cassidy Thornfield isn't interested in deals." They disappeared into the darkness. Cass tracked them with her scope until they were beyond her property line. Then she secured her cabin, checked every entry point, and settled in to wait for dawn. The message was sent. She wasn't prey, she wasn't a target, she was a threat. And anyone who forgot that would learn the hard way, but the real battle was still coming, and it would require more than just her skills to survive. Sheriff Brennan arrived at 4:30 with 2 deputies. They found Cass on her porch, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. "Miss Thornfield," Brennan said carefully. "Got your text. You want to explain what happened?" Cass handed him a USB drive. "Security camera footage. 4 armed men on my property at 300. I warned them off. They left. No shots fired at personnel. Brennan examined the drive. You said shots fired in your text. Warning shots, trees don't file complaints. This is the second time in a week you've reported armed intruders. This is the second time in a week armed intruders have tested my patience. Brennan sighed. The good man, fair, honest, but he was built for a small town and small problems, and this was escalating beyond his capacity. I'm going to be straight with you, he said. I don't have the resources to patrol your property 24/7, and I don't have the authority to investigate what these men are actually after. You need federal help. Federal help is coming. I made calls yesterday. What kind of calls? The kind that handles situations like this. Cass set down her coffee. Sheriff, I appreciate your concern, but if I can't protect my own property, what I need from you is documentation, official record of these incidents, time-stamped reports. So when this goes bigger, there's a paper trail showing I did everything by the book. Brennan studied her. You expecting this to go bigger? I'm expecting this to end, one way or another. He nodded slowly, took the USB drive. I'll file the reports, but Thornfield, be careful. These men are professionals, and professionals don't give up just because someone fired warning shots. Neither do I, Sheriff. Morrison and his deputies left. Cass showered, changed, and prepared for the 800 meeting at Hutchinson's ranch. Her teammate would arrive at 600 from Missoula. 2 more operators would arrive, courtesy of Hutchinson's connections. By 900, they'd have a team. By noon, they'd have a plan. By nightfall, they'd be operational. Her phone buzzed at 5:45. Text from an unknown number, driveway in 5. Hope you made coffee. Cass smiled. She'd recognize that attitude anywhere. The truck that rolled up her driveway at 5:50 was a beat-up Ford F-250 that had seen better decades. The man who climbed out looked like he'd been built from spare parts and bad decisions. 6 feet tall, 200 pounds of muscle and scar tissue, with a beard that could hide small weapons and eyes that never stopped scanning. Dominic "Dom" Reeves had been Marine EOD for 12 years before retiring to private contracting. Cass had worked with him on 3 operations in Syria. He was the best explosive ordnance technician she'd ever met, and one of the few men who'd never questioned whether she belonged on a combat team. Thornfield, Dom said, pulling her into a hug that lifted her off the ground. You look too healthy for someone who called in a favor at 200. I'm in trouble, Dom. The kind that needs your particular expertise. Figured you don't call unless it's nuclear, he paused. Please tell me it's not actually nuclear. Cass's expression answered before her words did. Oh hell, Dom said, it's actually nuclear. Inside, over coffee strong enough to strip paint, Cass briefed him on everything. The poachers, the bunkers, the plutonium cores, Hutchinson's 50-year-old guilt, the senator's corruption, the black market buyers waiting for materials that could kill thousands. Dom listened without interrupting. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and laughed, sharp and disbelieving. So let me get this straight. You bought a mountain, found Cold War nukes buried in your backyard, discovered a government cover-up, and now you're planning to stop a professional theft operation with. What? 4 people. That's the summary, yes. And you called me because you're the only EOD tech I trust with radioactive materials, because you're solid in a firefight, and because you owe me for Syria, Dom grinned. I saved your life in Syria, after I saved yours in Raqqa. Fair point. He stood, stretched, cracked his neck. All right, I'm in. When do I meet the rest of this suicide squad? 800 Hutchinson's ranch. The legendary Colonel Hutchinson, the guy you said treated you like garbage. Turns out he trained my instructor, and he feels guilty about judging me. We're working past it. Working past it? Dom repeated. This should be fun to watch. They arrived at Hutchinson's ranch at 7:55, and what Cass found there would prove that warriors recognized each other regardless of generation, and that the team being assembled was more formidable than anyone could have imagined. 2 vehicles were already parked in the driveway when they arrived. A newer Chevy Silverado and a vintage Jeep Wrangler that had more rust than paint. Hutchinson met them on the porch. He'd aged a decade overnight, the weight of 50 years of secrets finally speaking its toll. Thornfield, this your teammate. Dominic Reeves, Marine EOD, 12 years of service, 6 deployments, best in the business. Hutchinson shook Dom's hand, Marine to Marine, the grip of men who'd walked through fire. Good to have you, Staff Sergeant. Come inside. The others are here. The others were exactly what Cass expected, military through their bones, warriors who couldn't quite let go of the life. The first was Garrison Fletcher, 57 years old but built like he was still running BUDS training. 6'1", gray hair buzzed to stubble, forearms like steel cables. He'd been a SEAL Team 5 medic, served with Hutchinson in Somalia back in '93, retired 10 years ago but maintained his certifications. Now he ran a wilderness medicine school in Wyoming. Call me Gar, he said, shaking Cass's hand with a grip that tested her. Heard you're the one who got Garrett Hutchinson's highest recommendation. That boy doesn't praise lightly. Gunny Hutchinson saved my life, Cass said. I owe him everything. Then you'll understand why I'm here. Garrett asked me to watch your back, so I'm watching. The second was Luther Cross, 42 Marine Force Recon, built like a linebacker with a shaved head and a scar that ran from his left ear to his chin. Retired in 2018, now running a security consulting firm in Bozeman. He moved with the coiled energy of someone who could go from zero to violence in a heartbeat. Heard you made some impressive long-range shots in your career, Luther said. His voice was surprisingly soft for a man his size. Looking forward to seeing if the rumors are true. Looking forward to not having to prove it, Cass replied. But I'll do what's necessary. The dynamic settled quickly. 5 operators, different generations, different branches, but the same language, the same understanding, the kind that came from shared experience in places where mistakes meant death. Hutchinson spread his old site Yankee map across his dining table, added newer topographical maps, satellite imagery Cass had pulled from commercial sources, GPS coordinates, camera locations, everything they knew about the Poachers' operation. 14 bunkers, Hutchinson began. The Poachers have recovered at least 4 cores, maybe more. We've confirmed Bunker Alpha was hit 6 days ago. Intel suggests they've taken Bravo, Charlie, and Delta as well. Dom studied the map. That's fast work, professional team, good equipment. They know exactly what they're looking for. Which means they have inside information, Gar said. Someone gave them locations, access codes, handling procedures. This isn't random. Cass pulled up a file on her laptop. Meet Travis Vance. Former Delta Force, discharged in 2015 for conduct violations. Since then, he's been a private military contractor specializing in high-value material recovery. Translation, he steals things governments don't want stolen. And the inside man? Hutchinson asked quietly. Senator Harrison Caldwell, your former commanding officer, the man who ordered those cores buried 50 years ago. Cass turned the laptop to show Caldwell's official phode. Distinguished, silver-haired, respectable. He's in financial trouble, campaign debts, legal issues, needs money fast. Vance approached him with a deal. Caldwell provides locations and intel. Vance handles recovery and sale. They split the profit. The room was silent. Hutchinson's face had gone gray. Harrison Caldwell, he finally said. We served together for 8 years. He was my mentor, taught me everything about leadership, about honor, about doing what's right even when it's hard. And then he betrayed all of it, Cass said gently. 50 years ago. Now he's doing it again. Hutchinson nodded slowly. Then we stop him, both of them, whatever it takes. They spent 4 hours planning, breaking down bunker locations, analyzing terrain, discussing approach routes and defensive positions, and what they decided would determine whether they survived the coming battle or died trying. The tactical discussion was intense, methodical. Each operator brought their expertise to bear. Dom calculated timelines for core recovery, factoring in radiation protocols and handling procedures. With proper equipment, we can extract a core in 90 minutes. But we need lead-line transport cases, dosimeters, protective gear. One mistake with this stuff and we're looking at acute radiation syndrome. Gar inventoried medical supplies, planned casualty evacuation routes, established treatment priorities. I can handle gunshot wounds, fractures, standard combat trauma. But if someone gets dosed with radiation, we're beyond field medicine. We'd need immediate medevac to a facility with decontamination capabilities. Luther analyzed the tactical situation. We're looking at minimum 6 hostiles, probably more. Former military, well-equipped, motivated by serious money. They'll have contingency plans, backup teams, communications. We hit them, they'll respond hard. Cass and Hutchinson worked on sniper positions, overlapping fields of fire, primary and alternate locations, wind patterns at different elevations, the technical details that separated good shooting from legendary shooting. You've got the skills, Hutchinson said, marking a position on the map. But do you have the experience? Have you made a shot past 1,000 yards in combat conditions? 1,247 yards, Cass said. Helmand Province, 2020. High wind, moving target, elevated position. HVT extraction mission, 1 shot. Hutchinson looked up. 1,247, that's the same distance as my record shot. Panama, 1989. It's taught at scout sniper schools, the textbook example of extreme range precision fire. Something shifted in Hutchinson's expression. Recognition, maybe respect. Who was your spotter? Gunny Garrett Hutchinson, your son. Hutchinson set down his pencil. He never told me he'd coached a shot matching my record. He said records didn't matter, only results, only bringing everyone home. Cass held his gaze. He said you taught him that. Hutchinson was quiet for a long moment, then he nodded. Right, your primary sniper I'll spot. Let's prove that modern warriors can still make the old guard proud. By 1300, they had a workable plan, 2-person teams. Cass and Hutchinson would handle long-range overwatch and sniper operations. Dom and Gar would execute core recovery with proper radiation protocols. Luther would coordinate communications and provide mobile support. They'd start with the bunkers closest to Cass's cabin, work outward, recover as many cores as possible before Vance's team could react. "What about resistance?" Dom asked. "Vance won't just let us waltz in and take his payday." "We go in hard and fast," Cass said. "Dawn operations. Hit 3 bunkers in 6 hours, recover cores, secure them, move to the next location before Vance realizes what's happening. And when he does realize, then we're ready for a fight." They broke for lunch, MREs from Gar's truck, the kind of meal that transported them all back to deployment days. Questionable food, good company, mission focus. Dom pulled Cass aside during the break. "You trust Hutchinson after everything?" "I trust his guilt. I trust his need to fix this. And I trust that he trained the man who trained me. That's a lineage of knowledge I can believe in." "Fair enough, and the others?" Gar served with Hutchinson in Somalia. "He's solid, saved 12 lives under fire. If someone gets hurt, he's who I want working on them. Luther's force recon, experienced, capable, good under pressure." "And me?" Cass smiled. "You're the glue, the one who keeps everyone calm when things go sideways. Plus, you can disarm a nuke with a paperclip and attitude." "That's valuable." "Damn right it is." Dom glanced back at the house. "This is going to get messy, isn't it?" "Probably." "Good, I was getting bored with contracting work anyway." They reconvened at 1400 for equipment check, and what they didn't know was that they were about to receive intelligence that would change everything. Intelligence from an unexpected source that would force them into the fight of their lives. At 1600, Cass received an encrypted message on her secure phone. "Unknown sender, military-grade encryption. MA, Vance planning major recovery operation, tomorrow night. Bunkers Echo Foxtrot Golf Hotel. 4 cores in 1 push. He's bringing reinforcements. Count 12 operators plus 4 security personnel from Caldwell. You're outnumbered 4-1. Suggest defensive strategy. Pick your ground. Make them come to you." Cass read it aloud. The team absorbed the intelligence. "Maxwell Anderson," Hutchinson said. "Vance's former teammate." He reported Vance for black market dealing and civilian casualties. They were both discharged as a result. Anderson's been tracking Vance ever since. "Why help us?" Gar asked. "Redemption, revenge, justice." Hutchinson shrugged. "Maybe all 3. Anderson's a good man who made hard choices. If he says Vance is coming with 16 personnel, we believe him." Dom did the math. 5 of us against 16 of them, on terrain they've studied, for materials they're willing to kill for. "Bad odds," Cass agreed. "So we don't fight on their terms, we choose the battlefield, we force them to come to us." "Where?" Luther asked. Cass studied the map, found the location Anderson had mentioned. Bunker Hotel, the most remote facility, highest elevation, surrounded by exposed terrain with limited cover. "Here," she said, tapping the map. "Bunker Hotel, 9,600 feet elevation, open ridgeline approach. We fortify the position, set up proper defensive fields of fire, and make them fight uphill through a killing zone." "That's a last stand," Dom said quietly. "No, it's a shooting gallery with us behind the triggers." Hutchinson examined the location. "It's risky. If they bring heavy weapons, mortars, anything with real firepower, we're exposed." "They won't. Too much risk of damaging the cores, radiation dispersal, environmental contamination. They need precision, not firepower. Which means rifles and tactics, and in a rifle fight we have the advantage." "Why?" Gar asked. Cass smiled, cold and curt. "Because I'm the best shot any of them will ever face, and they won't even see me until it's too late." The room was quiet, then Dom laughed. "Hell, I'm convinced. Let's build a fortress and dare them to take it." They spent the rest of the day preparing. Dom and Gar drove to Cass's property to scout Bunker Hotel and plan defensive positions. Cass, Hutchinson, and Luther stayed at the ranch, refining the tactical plan, running through contingencies, preparing for every scenario they could imagine. At 1900, Hutchinson's phone rang. He listened, spoke briefly, hung up with a grim expression. "That was Brennan. Sheriff's department got a call about suspicious vehicles near your property. 3 trucks, 8 men armed. He's sending deputies to investigate." "Tell him to stand down," Cass said immediately. "This is beyond local law enforcement. We don't want civilians in the crossfire." Hutchinson made the call, explained carefully. Brennan wasn't happy, but he understood. Some battles weren't meant for small-town sheriffs. At 2100, Dom and Gar returned. They brought detailed photographs, GPS waypoints, terrain analysis. "Hotel is perfect," Dom reported. "Single approach route, steep climb, limited cover. If we set up right, we can control the entire approach for 800 yards. Radiation levels. Manageable, the bunkers sealed properly. Core should be intact and contained. With proper equipment and protocols, we can extract safely." "Then that's our play," Cass said. Tomorrow night we fortify hotel, recover the core, and wait for Vance to make his move. And the other 3 bunkers he's targeting? Gar asked. We don't have the manpower to defend 4 locations, Cass said. So we let him have Echo, Foxtrot, and Golf, 3 cores, but we hold hotel. And once we have that core secured and federal authorities engaged, Vance's entire operation collapses. Hutchinson nodded slowly. It sounds strategy. Give up the battles to win the war. Unless Anderson's intel is wrong, Dom pointed out. Unless Vance changes his plans, unless there are variables we haven't accounted for. There are always variables, Cass said. That's why we plan for chaos and pray for boring. They finalized the timeline. 400 departure. 600 arrival at Bunker Hotel. 2 hours to fortify position and recover core. 800 federal authorities notified with complete evidence package. By the time Vance's team arrived for their evening operation, they'd be facing not just 5 operators, but FBI, DOE, and whatever other federal agencies descended on a nuclear material theft. Get some sleep, Cass told her team. Tomorrow's going to be long and possibly violent. I need everyone sharp. Gar, Dom, and Luther took guest rooms in Hutchinson's house. Cass prepared to drive back to her cabin, but Hutchinson stopped her. Stay here tonight, he said. Your property's compromised. They know where you live. Here we have security numbers, and honestly, I'd rest easier knowing you're not alone. Cass considered refusing. Pride, independence, the same instincts that had kept her isolated for 8 months. But she was building a team now, learning to trust again. Learning that asking for help wasn't weakness. All right, thank you. Thank you, Hutchinson said quietly, for giving an old man the chance to fix his mistakes, and for showing me that I was wrong about more than just buried nuclear weapons. They sat on his porch as the stars came out, 2 snipers separated by 4 decades of service, but united by the same commitment to precision, honor, and doing what was right even when it was hard. Tell me about Garrett, Hutchinson said. My son. He doesn't talk much about his work, but you trained with him, learned from him. What's he like as an instructor? Cass smiled. Demanding, uncompromising, brilliant. He can read a shooter's mistakes from 500 yards away, knows exactly what you're doing wrong before you do. But he's patient, encouraging. He believes everyone can improve if they're willing to work. Sounds like his mother. She was a teacher, best I ever knew. Hutchinson's voice carried old grief. Lost her to cancer in 2003. Never got to see Garrett make gunnery sergeant. He talks about her, says she taught him that teaching is the most important mission. That knowledge passed on is the only thing that survives us. Hutchinson wiped his eyes, not hiding it, just acknowledging. I should call him, tell him about this, about you, about finally doing the right thing. After, Cass said, after we finish this. So you can tell him it's done, that the cores are secure, that the guilty are caught, that justice got served even 50 years late. You're very certain we'll succeed. I have to be. Certainty is what makes the shot connect. They sat in comfortable silence, old warrior and young warrior, learning that respect wasn't about age or gender or generation. It was about competence, courage, and the willingness to stand when standing mattered. At 2300, Cass went to sleep in Hutchinson's guest room, M4A1 beside her bed, go bag packed, phone charging, ready for 400 departure. She dreamed of mountains and missions, of gunfire and ghosts, of the ambush in Helmand Province where she'd lost teammates and found the limit of her endurance. But this time in the dream, she didn't run from the valley. She stood her ground, made the shots that mattered, brought everyone home. She woke at 3:30, 30 minutes before the alarm. Old habits from deployment days, the body knowing before the mind that it was time to work. The house was already stirring. Coffee brewing, men checking weapons, the quiet efficiency of professionals preparing for operations. By 400, they were loaded and moving. 2 vehicles, Cass and Hutchinson in her truck with the sniper rifles and observation equipment. Dom, Gar, and Luther in Gar's Jeep with the EOD gear and medical supplies. They drove through darkness toward the mountain that held secrets buried for 50 years, toward a bunker that would become a battlefield, toward the moment where 5 operators would face 16 hostiles and prove that skill mattered more than numbers. The sky was just beginning to lighten when they reached the base of the ridgeline leading to Bunker Hotel. They parked the vehicles in concealed positions, covered them with camouflage netting, and began the 3-mile hike to the summit. Cass led the way. Her mountain, her mission, her responsibility. Behind her, 4 warriors followed, each carrying the weight of their own histories, each committed to seeing this through to whatever end awaited. The sun broke over the eastern peaks as they reached Bunker Hotel. Golden light spilled across exposed granite and sparse vegetation. The bunker entrance was exactly where Hutchinson's 50-year-old map indicated, concrete door, rusted lock, the seal of secrets too long buried. Dom examined the entrance. Clean. No signs of tampering. Vance hasn't been here yet. Then we're ahead of schedule, Cass said. Let's make this count. They worked with practiced efficiency. Dom and Gar breached the bunker, swept for threats and booby traps, established safe entry protocols. Cass, Hutchinson, and Luther set up primary and alternate sniper positions with overlapping fields of fire covering the approach route. By 700, they were operational. The core was secured in a lead line transport case. Defensive positions were fortified. Communications were tested. Fields of fire were confirmed. They were ready. And somewhere below them, moving up the mountain with professional precision and criminal intent, Travis Vance led 16 men toward a confrontation he didn't know was waiting. A confrontation that would prove the difference between old legends and new warriors was nothing at all. Because warriors were warriors, regardless of when they served. And today, the best would remind 16 professionals why skill, position, and absolute certainty mattered more than numbers. The mountain held its breath. And Cassidy Thornfield, 27 years old, 1,247-yard veteran, disciple of Gunny Garrett Hutchinson and granddaughter in spirit to Colonel Wade Hutchinson, settled behind her rifle and waited for the moment when patience became violence. The moment that would define everything. The moment that was coming fast. The wind at 9,600 feet was a living thing. It gusted and swirled, pulled at clothing, whispered lies about trajectory and holdover. Cass had been tracking it for 90 minutes, learning its rhythm, understanding its moods. Wind at altitude wasn't linear. It curved around ridgelines, accelerated through gaps, died in pockets of dead air. Reading it required patience and instinct in equal measure. Hutchinson lay beside her in the primary hide, spotting scope steady on a small tripod. They'd built the position into the natural terrain, using rocks and sparse vegetation for concealment. From 400 yards, they were invisible. From 800 yards, they were ghosts. Movement, Hutchinson said quietly. Southeast approach, 4 individuals, tactical spacing. Cass shifted her scope, found them immediately, 4 men moving upslope with the careful precision of professionals who knew they were exposed. They wore civilian hiking gear but moved like soldiers, spacing too perfect, sector coverage too disciplined. These were Vance's advanced scouts. Range, 740 yards, Hutchinson called. Wind, 3 o'clock, 12 miles per hour sustained, gusting to 18. Cass did the calculations automatically. At this distance with this wind, she needed 2.3 mils of windage adjustment. The gusts complicated it, but she could wait for the lulls. Patience was the sniper's greatest weapon. I have the shot, she said, waiting for your call. Hold, Hutchinson said. Let them commit. Once they radio back that the approach is clear, the main force will follow. That's when we want contact. The scouts continued their advance. 600 yards now, 500. They were good, Cass had to admit. Proper use of cover, coordinated movement. But good wasn't enough when you were being tracked by someone better. At 400 yards, the lead scout stopped, raised his radio, keyed the mic, spoke briefly, lowered the radio, the universal signal that the path ahead was clear. Main force will be moving now, Hutchinson said. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they're in the kill zone. Copy, repositioning to cover the approach. They'd planned this carefully. 3 defensive positions, each covering different ranges and angles. The primary hide where they currently sat controlled 400 to 1,000 yards. Secondary position, 200 yards to their left, covered 200 to 500 yards. The tertiary position, another 150 yards beyond that, covered the final approach to the bunker entrance where Dom and Gar waited. Overlapping fields of fire, mutual support, the fundamental principle of defensive operations. Cass's radio crackled. Dom's voice, calm and professional. We have the package secured. Radiation levels nominal, ready to extract on your signal. Negative, Cass replied. Hold position, company's arriving. We need to neutralize the threat before we move. Copy, standing by. Cass settled deeper into her position, controlled her breathing, let her heart rate drop to operational levels. This was the moment she'd trained for across 6 years and 47 combat missions. The moment where skill became survival. The main force appeared at 1,200 yards. Even at that distance, Cass could count them. 12 individuals moving in 3 fire teams of 4. Professional tactics, proper spacing. These weren't Vance's scouts. These were his primary assault element. 12 hostiles confirmed, Hutchinson reported. Moving in tactical formation, armed with what looks like M4 variants and SR-25 designated marksman rifles. Any heavy weapons? Negative, just small arms. They're keeping it light, probably worried about damaging the core with explosives. Good, that's what we want. Cass tracked the lead element through her scope. Where's Vance? Center of the formation, moving with the 2nd Fire Team. Conservative positioning. He's letting his people take the risk. Smart, paranoid, probably why he's still alive. The assault force moved with grim efficiency. They knew their objective, knew the terrain, had probably studied satellite imagery and planned this operation for weeks. What they didn't know was that 5 operators were waiting with superior positions and the will to hold them. At 800 yards, the lead fire team entered Cass's optimal engagement range. She could take them now, drop 3 before they even knew they were under fire. But Hutchinson was right. Let them commit. Let them close the distance. Make them pay for every yard. Range 750, Hutchinson called. Wind holding steady at 14 mph. Pressure system stable. Visibility excellent. Cass made micro adjustments to her scope. The M24 was zeroed for 600 yards. Beyond that, she had to account for bullet drop, wind drift. The Coriolis affected extreme ranges. Every variable mattered. Every calculation had to be perfect. I'm going to start with the designated marksmen, Cass said. Take out their long-range capability first, then work through the fire team leaders. Solid tactics, on your call. At 720 yards, Cass found her first target. Male approximately 6 feet tall, carrying an SR-25 with a high-powered scope. Moving with the confidence of someone who'd made long-range shots before. He was Vance's counter-sniper insurance, the man who was supposed to identify and neutralize threats like Cass. She waited for the wind lull, watched the grass at 400 yards. When it stopped bending, she had a 3-second window. The rifle settled. The crosshairs found center mass. Cass's finger took up the trigger slack. The shot broke clean and smooth. The 300 Winchester Magnum round covered 720 yards in 1.1 seconds. The designated marksman dropped like someone had cut his strings. His rifle clattered on rocks. His team scattered, seeking cover that didn't exist on the exposed ridgeline. Hit, Hutchinson confirmed. Good shot. Reload. Cass cycled the bolt, chambered a fresh round, found her second target before the first fire team had finished reacting. Another designated marksman, 680 yards, moving into cover behind a boulder. The boulder provided concealment, not protection. Cass could see his leg extending beyond the rock face. She adjusted her aim point, sent the round. The man screamed, grabbed his shattered femur, rolled out of cover in shock and pain. Not a kill shot, but a fighter removed from the battlefield just as effectively. 2 down, Hutchinson said. His voice carried the approval of a master watching a student exceed expectations. They're pinned looking for the shooter, Cass smiled coldly. Let them look. At this range, with this position, with this wind, they'll never find me before I find them. The assault force went to ground, and what happened next would become the stuff of legend, a display of precision marksmanship that would be studied for years to come. The assault force went to ground. Radios crackled. Orders were shouted. They were professionals dealing with an unexpected complication. But Cass could see the problem they faced. No cover, no concealment, exposed on a ridgeline against a sniper who just made 2 difficult shots look easy. Vance's voice carried across the distance, authoritative and angry. Suppressive fire, mark the position. 8 rifles opened up simultaneously. Rounds snapped past Cass's hide, impacting rocks 50 yards to her left. They were guessing, shooting at shadows, wasting ammunition on empty terrain. Cass remained perfectly still, didn't flinch, didn't react, let them burn through magazines while she waited for targets. A fire team leader stood to direct his men, fatal mistake. Cass tracked him smoothly, 650 yards, light wind, perfect conditions. The shot caught him in the upper chest. He spun and fell. The suppressive fire faltered as his team realized their leader was down. 3 down, Hutchinson said. They're breaking, trying to flank left. I see them. 4 men were attempting to use a shallow depression as cover for a flanking maneuver. It might have worked against a less experienced shooter, but Cass could see the depression's limitations. In 200 yards, they'd have to cross an open area with 0 cover. She let them commit, watched them move with desperate hope that they'd found a solution, waited until they reached the kill zone. The first man across the open area made it 3 steps. The second made it 2. The third went to ground immediately, smart enough to recognize the trap, but there was nowhere to go. Cass took her time, made the shots count. By the time the flanking attempt collapsed, 6 of Vance's 12 operators were combat ineffective. The assault had stalled completely. The survivors huddled behind inadequate cover, pinned by a sniper they couldn't locate and couldn't suppress. It was every infantryman's nightmare, death from distance, invisible, inevitable. Cass's radio crackled. Dom's voice. You're putting on a clinic up there, but we've got movement from the south. 4 additional hostiles. Looks like Caldwell's security team. Copy, can you handle them? We're 200 yards from the bunker entrance. If they get close, we engage. Your call. Provide support if needed. I'll cover from here. Cass shifted her attention, found the new threat immediately. 4 men in suits, moving with less tactical precision than Vance's professionals. These were bodyguards, not soldiers, competent but not exceptional, and they were making a critical mistake. They were moving toward the bunker entrance, which meant they were moving directly into Dom and Gar's defensive position. Cass watched through her scope as the security team approached. 150 yards from the bunker. 100 yards. 75 yards. The ambush was textbook perfect. Dom and Gar rose from concealed positions with M4s leveled. The security team froze, weapons raised but not quite pointed, the universal moment of decision that determined whether violence erupted or common sense prevailed. "Drop your weapons," Dom's voice carried clearly across the mountain. "Federal investigation, you're interfering with law enforcement." It was a bluff. They weren't federal agents. But the bluff had weight, authority, the kind that made men think twice about dying for a paycheck. 3 of the 4 security personnel dropped their weapons immediately. The 4th hesitated. His hand tightened on his rifle. The moment stretched like a rubber band pulled to breaking. Cass centered her crosshairs on him. 400 yards, easy shot. If he raised that rifle toward Dom and Gar, she'd drop him before he finished the movement. But the moment passed. The 4th man lowered his weapon, raised his hands. Survival instinct overriding whatever loyalty he felt to Senator Caldwell. "Secure them," Gar said. Within minutes, all 4 were zip-tied and seated under guard. Cass returned her attention to Vance's pinned assault force. They'd used the distraction to regroup. The survivors had consolidated into 2 defensive positions, using the terrain as best they could. 6 operators, still combat effective, Vance among them. "They're preparing to withdraw," Hutchinson observed. "Cut their losses and extract." "No," Cass said. "They came for the core, they won't leave without it." She was right. Vance's voice carried across the ridgeline, rallying his men. "We didn't come this far to quit. The target's 300 yards ahead. We take it or we die trying." "Brave words," Hutchinson said. "Stupid tactics. Desperate tactics. He knows this is his last chance. After today, every federal agency will be hunting him." Vance led from the front this time, abandoning his safe position in the center, moving with his remaining operators in a coordinated rush toward the bunker. It was courage or madness or both, a final assault across open ground against entrenched defenders with superior firepower. Cass tracked him through her scope. 550 yards, 500, 450, she could end this now, drop Vance and watch his assault collapse, but something held her back, some instinct that this needed to play out differently. At 400 yards, Vance's team came under fire from Dom and Gar. M4s cracked in rapid succession, controlled pairs, professional fire discipline. 2 more of Vance's operators went down. The assault broke. The survivors scattered, seeking any cover they could find. Vance dove behind a boulder, trapped 400 yards from the bunker, pinned by crossfire from 2 positions. "He's done," Hutchinson said. "The assault's finished. Time to end this." But before Cass could respond, another voice joined the battle, and what happened next would shock everyone on that mountain. A voice amplified through a megaphone cut across the mountain, authoritative and arrogant. "Vance, stand down. This operation is over." Senator Harrison Caldwell emerged from the southern approach, 71 years old but moving with military bearing. He wore a tactical vest over his expensive suit, carried a pistol in his right hand, and looked absolutely furious. "Senator," Vance called back, "we can still do this. We just need." "We need nothing," Caldwell's voice cracked like thunder. "You failed, 6 men down. The core is compromised. Federal authorities are probably already en route. Then we extract now, take what we can." "I'm not extracting, I'm finishing this." Caldwell raised his pistol not toward the bunker, toward Vance. Cass's breath caught. Through her scope, she watched a 50-year conspiracy collapse in real time. "You were supposed to be professional," Caldwell shouted. "Surgical, instead you've drawn attention, created casualties, failed to secure even half the cores." "Senator, you need to calm." The pistol barked once, twice, 3 times. Vance jerked with each impact, fell, didn't move again. The surviving operators stared in shock. Their employer had just murdered their team leader. Whatever loyalty they'd felt evaporated instantly. Caldwell turned toward the bunker. He reached into his tactical vest, pulled out a small black device, a detonator with a red button and LED display showing armed in green letters. Through her scope, Cass felt ice water flood her veins. She recognized commercial blasting equipment when she saw it. "I had insurance," Caldwell's voice carried across the ridgeline. "Shape charges placed throughout the bunker complex. Dead man's switch. If I don't enter the disarm code every 60 seconds, or if someone kills me, this entire mountain becomes a radioactive wasteland." The LED display on the detonator blinked. 00, 47, 00, 46, 00, 45. The surviving operators began backing away rapidly. Nobody wanted to be near ground zero when plutonium got dispersed by high explosives. Cass's crosshairs tracked Caldwell. She could take the shot, drop him before he triggered the charges. But a dead man's switch meant the moment his heart stopped, the timer would hit 0. "Harrison, don't do this." Hutchinson's voice boomed across the mountain. He'd stood from their hide, making himself visible. "There's still a way out." Caldwell's head turned. Recognition flickered across his face. Jameson, is that you? The timer read 0038 0037 0036. It's me, Hutchinson said, and I'm asking you as a brother Marine, as someone who respected you once, stop this. Respected, Caldwell laughed, bitter and broken. You followed my orders without question. Never suspected, never questioned, just like a good little lieutenant. 0029 0028 0027. Put it down, Harrison, Hutchinson said. Whatever you've done, however deep you've fallen, this doesn't end it. This just makes it worse. Kills innocent people, poisons this land for generations. 0018 0017 0016. There's no peace for men like me, Caldwell said. He raised his left hand, the pistol, not toward Dom or the bunker, toward himself, barrel under his chin. I won't spend my final years in federal prison, Caldwell said. Won't let my legacy be treason and corruption. Better to end it here on a mountain like a warrior. And if I'm going, I'm taking these cores with me, making sure nobody profits from my mistakes. His left thumb moved toward the pistol trigger. His right thumb hovered over the detonator button. The LED read 0009 0008 0007. Harrison, Hutchinson started. Cass had 3 seconds to make a decision that would determine whether everyone on that mountain lived or died, and the shot she made would become the stuff of legend. The wind lulled, 3-second window. Cass made her choice. The shot came from 890 yards. She hadn't waited for permission, hadn't asked for authorization. She'd simply read the moment and made the call that a trained sniper makes when someone's life hangs in the balance. The bullet struck Caldwell's pistol, obliterated the weapon in his hand. Metal fragments tore through his palm. The pistol spun away, harmless. Caldwell screamed, dropped to his knees, clutching his mangled hand. The detonator fell to the ground. Dom rushed forward, secured the senator with zip ties, applied combat gauze to the mangled hand, grabbed the detonator, carefully entered the disarm code based on intel Anderson had provided. The LED display blinked once, then went dark. Within seconds, Caldwell was neutralized, the threat eliminated. Hutchinson turned to Cass. His expression was complex gratitude, shock, something deeper that might have been pride. 890 yards, he said quietly. In high wind. Moving target, hand-sized objective, that's impossible. That's the standard you set, Cass replied. Panama 1989, I just matched it. The surviving operators surrendered immediately. Without Vance or Caldwell, they had no reason to fight. Dom and Gar secured them efficiently. Within 20 minutes, the entire assault force was neutralized. Cass and Hutchinson descended from their position. The adrenaline was fading now, replaced by the exhaustion that always followed combat. Cass had fired 11 rounds, made 9 hits, 2 misses that bothered her even though the hit percentage was exceptional. Dom met them at the bunker entrance. Federal authorities are 15 minutes out. FBI, DOE, probably half the alphabet agencies. Someone dropped a comprehensive intel package about this operation. Anderson, Cass said. Vance's former partner. He's been feeding us information the whole time. Well, he came through. You've got bodies, witnesses, the senator, and 1 secured plutonium core. This is going to be the case that ends careers and starts investigations. Gar was treating casualties. The wounded operators would survive. Vance would not. Caldwell sat in shocked silence, staring at his ruined hand and his ruined life. Hutchinson walked to the senator, crouched beside him. Harrison, why? You had everything, respect, honor, a legacy that would have outlived you. Why throw it away? Caldwell looked up with empty eyes. Because legacy doesn't pay debts, because honor doesn't buy silence, because 50 years ago I made a choice that seemed pragmatic, and every day since then I've been trapped by it. He laughed bitterly. I became the thing I fought against, the corrupt politician, the sellout, and the worst part is I can't even remember when it happened. It was just one compromise, then another, until the man I was disappeared entirely. You could have come clean 20 years ago, 10 years ago. Any time? And destroy everything, admit I'd lied, face court-martial, prison, disgrace? Caldwell shook his head. I told myself I'd handle it, fix it quietly, make it right without consequences. But you can't fix corruption quietly. It spreads, metastasizes, and eventually someone like her, he nodded at Cass, comes along and shines a light on it. Cass stood over him, this broken man who betrayed everything for money and pride. And what she said next would define not just this moment, but everything she'd learned from 6 years of combat. Cass stood over him, this broken man who betrayed everything for money and pride. She felt no satisfaction, no triumph, just tired recognition that the world created these situations constantly, and someone had to stand against them. Did you know about the 3 teammates I lost? Cass asked quietly. Caldwell looked confused. What? Helmand Province, 2021, ambush, 3 dead, 2 wounded. I was the only one who walked away clean. It destroyed me, made me question everything about my service, whether I was good enough, whether I deserved to survive when they didn't. I don't understand. I almost let that guilt bury me, almost let it define the rest of my life, but I made a choice. I wouldn't let their deaths be meaningless. I'd honor them by being better, by standing when standing mattered, by protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. Cass crouched to his level. You made a choice too, 50 years ago, and instead of honoring it by making amends, you compounded it. Let it metastasize. Let it turn you into the thing you despised. That's the difference between us, Senator. I learned from my failure. You became yours. Caldwell had nothing to say to that. He simply sat, broken and silent, waiting for the federal agents who would take him away. The helicopters arrived at 14:30. FBI hostage rescue team, DOE specialists in hazmat suits, enough firepower and authority to lock down the entire mountain. They found a scene already secured, suspects zip-tied, evidence cataloged, 1 plutonium core properly contained in a lead-line transport case. The FBI special agent in charge was a woman named Victoria Hayes, 50 years old, steel gray hair, eyes that missed nothing. She surveyed the scene with professional appreciation. Let me guess, former military. All of us, Cass confirmed. We secured the scene and waited for proper authorities. That was considerate. Most civilians would have made this into a bloodbath. Hayes examined the wounded operators, the secured senator, the recovered core. Who made the long-range shots? Those are sniper-level hits. Cass raised her hand slightly. Hayes studied her, reassessing. You're the property owner, Cassidy Thornfield, former SEAL? Yes, ma'am. And you discovered this operation how? Poachers on my land led to bunkers, led to Cold War nuclear materials, led to... Here. Hayes nodded slowly. We're going to need comprehensive statements from all of you. This is going to be a federal case that draws attention from Congress, probably the president. You understand that? We understand. Good, because right now you're heroes who stopped a nuclear material theft. I'd like to keep it that way, which means cooperating fully with our investigation. They spent 6 hours giving statements. Every detail, every decision, every shot fired, and why. The federal agents were thorough, professional, and increasingly impressed with how 5 operators had neutralized a force more than 3 times their size with minimal casualties. Maxwell Anderson arrived at 1800. He looked like his voice suggested, mid-40s, weathered, carrying the weight of hard decisions. He spoke briefly with Hayes, then approached Cass's team. You're the ones who stopped Vance. We're the ones who secured the cores, Cass corrected. You're the one who provided intel. Without you, this would have been a lot messier. Anderson nodded. Vance was my responsibility. I reported him 5 years ago, thought that would end it. Instead, it just made him more careful, more dangerous. When I learned he was going after Site Yankee materials, I knew I had to act. Why not come forward earlier? Hutchinson asked. Because I needed proof evidence that would stick. Vance was too smart to leave obvious trails. I had to wait until he committed, until he made a move that exposed everyone involved. Anderson looked at Caldwell being loaded into an FBI helicopter, including senators who should have known better. You saved lives today, Cass said. That counts for something. Maybe I'm just trying to balance scales that can't be balanced. Anderson held out his hand. Cass shook it. You're a hell of a shot. That 890-yard pistol hit is going to be legend by tomorrow. I had a good teacher, Gunny Hutchinson, and his father. Anderson glanced at Hutchinson, recognition dawning. You're the Hutchinson, Panama sniper, Marine legend. Retired Marine, Hutchinson corrected. And clearly outclassed by the next generation. They were released at 2200 with instructions to remain available for follow-up questions. The drive back to Cass's cabin was quiet, exhaustion settling into bones, the adrenaline crash that followed every combat operation. At Cass's cabin, they gathered on the porch. Coffee and bourbon, the combination that had sustained warriors since alcohol and caffeine were discovered. What now? Gar asked. Now we wait, Cass said. Federal investigation, trials, probably congressional hearings. This is going to take years to fully resolve. And us, the team, Cass looked at the 4 men who'd answered her call, who'd trusted her leadership, who'd fought beside her against impossible odds. We did something good today, stopped a threat most people will never know existed, secured materials that could have killed thousands, brought justice to men who'd hidden crimes for half a century. She raised her coffee mug. I'd call that a successful mission. They drank to that, to success, to survival, to bonds forged in combat. Dom and Gar left the next morning, promises to stay in touch, invitations to visit, the friendships created in war and maintained in peace. Luther departed shortly after, heading back to his security consulting firm in Bozeman, but with Cass's number in his phone and an open invitation to call if she ever needed backup again. Hutchinson stayed an extra day. He and Cass walked her property, discussing the operation, analyzing decisions, debriefing the way soldiers do when they need to process what they've lived through. "You're exceptional," Hutchinson said as they stood overlooking the valley. "Not just skilled, exceptional, the kind of operator that comes along once in a generation. I learned from the best. Garrett would be proud. Hell, I'm proud. And I'm sorry it took almost losing everything to recognize what was obvious from the start." Cass accepted the apology, the sincerity behind it. "What about you? What's next for Colonel Hutchinson?" "Same thing that's next for you, living with what we did, hoping it mattered," he smiled. "And maybe being available if you need backup again." "I'll remember that." Hutchinson left that afternoon, but his truck was barely out of sight when Cass's phone rang. Unknown number. "Thornfield." "Miss Thornfield, this is Director Patricia Brennan with the Department of Energy." The woman's voice was professional, direct. "We've reviewed your actions regarding the site Yankee recovery. I'd like to discuss a consulting position, legacy weapons recovery. We have sites across the country with similar issues. We need people with your skills and discretion." Cass looked out at her mountain, at the peace she'd sought, at the solitude she'd craved. But she'd learned something in the last week. She wasn't meant for pure isolation. She was meant for missions that mattered, for standing when standing was needed, for being the person who could handle impossible situations because she'd trained for impossible her entire adult life. "I'm interested," Cass said, "under certain conditions. Name them. I choose my team, I approve the missions, and I stay based here in Montana. I won't relocate." "Silence then. Acceptable. We'll send contract details by the end of the week." The call ended. Cass set down her phone and smiled. 2 months later, Copper Ridge held a town meeting. Standard fall business, water rights, boundary disputes, the usual territorial chess. But this time, when Cass entered the community hall, the room didn't go quiet with judgment. People nodded, shook her hand, thanked her for what she'd done, even though the official story was classified and vague. Sheriff Brennan updated everyone on the federal investigation, carefully worded, protecting operational details, but making it clear that something significant had happened on that mountain and Cass had been central to resolving it. Colonel Hutchinson stood when the floor opened for comments. "I want to address something I said 8 months ago at this very meeting. I made judgments about modern military standards, about capabilities, about a particular individual." He looked directly at Cass. "I was wrong, completely, and I want this community to know that Cassidy Thornfield is one of the finest warriors I've had the privilege of serving alongside. She's proven that skill, courage, and honor aren't bound by gender or generation, and I'm grateful she chose our valley for her home." The room applauded, not polite courtesy, but genuine respect. After the meeting, townspeople approached Cass. Conversations, invitations, the slow integration into a community that had dismissed her but now embraced her. On her way out, a young woman stopped her, maybe 23, nervous but determined. "Miss Thornfield, I'm Emma Brennan, the sheriff's daughter. I'm thinking about joining the military, maybe trying for SEAL training, but I keep hearing it's too hard, that women can't really make it through, that the standards are different." Cass recognized the doubt in Emma's eyes, the same doubt she'd faced, the same judgment. "The standards aren't different," Cass said. "They're brutal, unforgiving, designed to break everyone who attempts them, but they're not impossible, not if you want it badly enough, not if you're willing to work harder than you've ever worked, not if you can look at failure and say, 'Teach me instead of defeat me.' Did you ever want to quit? Every day, sometimes every hour, BUDS is designed to make you quit. But I'd made a promise to myself, and I'd rather die than break a promise." Emma absorbed this. If I train, will you help me?" Cass smiled. "Every Saturday morning, 600 my place. Bring running shoes and the willingness to suffer. I'll be there." Watching Emma walk away, Cass felt something shift. Legacy not through blood or family, but through knowledge passed forward, skills shared, the next generation prepared to carry forward the values that mattered. That night, Cass sat on her porch, stars brilliant above Montana darkness, the mountain peaceful around her. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mission brief attached. Kazakhstan, similar situation, interested. Director Brennan. Cass opened the attachment, read the details. Another legacy site, more buried materials, another threat that needed stopping. She thought about the peace she'd sought, the isolation she'd craved, the life she'd tried to build away from combat and violence and impossible decisions. But she'd learned who she really was. Not someone running from her past, someone prepared for her future, a warrior who chose her battles, a protector who stood when standing mattered, a teacher who passed knowledge forward. Cass typed her response, send travel details. I'll need 3 days to arrange things here. The reply was immediate, acknowledged. Welcome to the team. Cass set down her phone and looked out at her mountain, the place that had tested her, changed her, revealed her. She wasn't just Cassidy Thornfield anymore, property owner, isolated veteran, woman dismissed and underestimated. She was an operator, sniper, warrior. And most importantly, someone who'd proven that legends weren't born in any particular generation. They were forged by choices, by standing when others ran, by making impossible shots when everything depended on them. The mountain had held secrets for 50 years. Now it held a different kind of secret. The woman who'd walked away from war had found her way back, not to destruction, but to purpose. And in a cabin on 2,400 acres of Montana wilderness, Cassidy Thornfield cleaned her rifle, packed her gear, and prepared for the next mission. Because warriors didn't retire. They just found new battles worth fighting. And Cass had found hers. The phone rang again. Hutchinson's number. "Saw the news about Kazakhstan," he said without preamble. "You're going." "I am. Need a spotter," Cass smiled. "Always, if you're available. For you, I'll make myself available. This old warrior isn't done yet." "Neither am I, Colonel. Neither am I." They ended the call with plans to coordinate 2 generations, 2 warriors, 1 commitment to doing what was right even when it was hard. The stars wheeled overhead. The mountains settled into night. And Cass felt for the first time since Helmand Province that she'd found her place in the world. Not in isolation, not in peace, but in purpose. In missions that mattered, in making shots that counted. She was home, and home was wherever warriors gathered to stand against darkness. The legend of Iron Hutchinson would endure, but beside it now stood another legend, smaller, younger, just as deadly. Cassidy Thornfield, the sniper who bought a mountain and defended it against impossible odds. The woman who proved that size didn't matter, gender didn't matter, only skill, courage, and the absolute certainty that when you pulled the trigger, the shot would connect. That certainty was everything, and Cass had it in abundance. The mountain held its secrets, the warrior held her ground, and the next mission was waiting. Up next, you've got 2 more incredible stories waiting on your screen. If this one hit you, tap to watch the next, and make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. Oh, and drop your city in the comments. I want to see where you're watching from.